All right, welcome back to Double Fries, No Slaw. TJ and Richie here chatting with you. No live show this week, so we're doing a couple of clips. Richie, first up to talk about, did GameDay snub FSU? Did you kind of in your heart think that they might do it for Corso, for Coach? I actually kind of was disappointed because I thought there was a chance they would pick us. I understand why they didn't. For several reasons, but what were your immediate thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here. The fact that they announced prior to announcing the location that this would be Lee Corso's final show. And I think we all knew that was coming. And it's been time for a few years, but, God bless that man for, sticking on and just doing what he loves. And obviously, Texas and Ohio State is the biggest game of opening weekend. There's no doubting that. It'll be two top three, top four teams in the country. What kind of bothers me a little bit is it's Corso's last game. It's not like Florida State is playing Kent State or Savannah State or some nobody in week one, right? That would be understandable. They are playing Alabama, and I know it's not Nick Saban's Alabama, but it is still two massive brands in college football. And the thing that baffles me a little bit is Fox announced prior that they're having their version of College Game Day at Texas and Ohio State, and Fox is carrying that game. And then ESPN, when you look at, yes, Texas is a SEC school, so I get that. But at the same time, you have two of your biggest brands in your TV contracts in Florida State and Alabama, and where Lee Corso went to school. And Lee Corso, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the first headgear he ever did was the 93 Florida State Notre Dame game when he put a Florida State hat on and predicted them to win. It just would have been a perfect circle for him to pick Florida State to beat Alabama, even if he didn't believe it. I think he would have picked Florida State. It just would have been the perfect send-off for Lee Corso, and it just stinks that I do think it was a snub, 100%.
All right, I'll get right back to chatting with Richie, but first I do want to give some more love to our friends over at Emerald Medical. Several of you have asked me and reached out to Emerald Medical because you're feeling tired, sluggish, or just off a little bit. They've got a deal for you. If you mention DFNS or use that code on their website, they will give you a free consultation. You don't have to go in. You can do it all via telehealth. Log in and chat with them. It could be low testosterone, and they can certainly help you reclaim that energy. I've seen the analytics on these videos. I know what gender you guys are. I know what age you guys are. If you are feeling just a little bit off, reach out to Emerald Medical. See if they can help you reclaim that energy with testosterone replacement therapy. Again, code DFNS will get you a free consultation and save on your journey to feeling like the new you again. Owned by Chris, my good buddy, a huge college football fan, Emerald Medical will offer personalized care that you can trust. Visit emeraldhrt.com. Remember the code DFNS to schedule your free consultation now. All right, so I'm going to play devil's advocate. I don't believe any of this, but I am going to play devil's advocate for the purpose of the show, right? So before everybody cusses me out or unsubscribes, which if you're not subscribed, hit the button. I'm going to give the other side and see if we can start a little bit justify it. You are right about the 93, him putting on the FSU hat. Now people say that's not actually headgear. It literally is headgear by definition. Yes. Obviously the first time he put on a big, what we consider, or what most people consider headgear was Brutus. So Ohio State fans will be pissy about that in the mention. So thanks a lot for saying it. But okay. Couple of counterpoints. One is Florida State's current status. If Florida State went 10-2 last year instead of 2-10, I think they would have probably come to Tallahassee because this also would be a top 5 matchup. Now, would it be a rematch of a playoff game? I don't know. It might have been. If Florida State goes 10-2, which ACC team that was up there isn't up there, right? Florida State would have either knocked out SMU or Clemson and been in the playoff. And then by doing that, would they have knocked out SMU and Bama made it too? So it might have been a playoff rematch. If Florida State would have taken care of their own business last year, they would have had a lot better chance to do this. And I'm not trying to take blame away from ESPN or GameDay or anything like that, but let's call a spade a spade. If Florida State had gone 10-2, there's a really good chance that GameDay comes to Tallahassee for this game. I think 2-10 factored in a massive way. And so I don't want to take the blame away from ESPN because we all know we like to yell at them for everything. But I do think we got to look internally a little bit. And when I said I don't believe all this, I actually do believe this one. So this is the part of it that I do think you can kind of look at and say, all right, we got to look in the mirror. Like we were atrocious. That I don't know if Game Day has ever opened up the season at a 2-10 program, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if they've ever said like, oh, that team went 2-10 last year. Let's go to Game Day. Now, I understand the Corso side too. The one thing I'll say on Corso is, and this is the part where I'm maybe just throwing a thought into the air and maybe don't believe it as much. I don't know. And I saw somebody say this on social media. I don't know who. I wish I could say who, but it wasn't, like some viral tweet or anything. But I think maybe it was Aaron Cabrera. But I think Corso nationally is much more known for ESPN than he's known for Florida State. Like it's not like Jameis. If Jameis gets that job, right? Which I think I just made something right now, because if you want to get FSU fans to start watching Game Day again, that's how you do it. But Corso is not really known for FSU. He's very much known for ESPN and Game Day, right? And your average fan out there may not even know that he went to FSU because of how long ago it was, right? Like when you're playing in the 50s, like people aren't remembering that. Whereas if Jameis went and started working in Corso's role, right? He was the funny guy that put on the headgear and did all this stuff, which again, I do think is kind of a good idea that I just created. So, people would remember Jameis for FSU, that he's now there, right? Kind of like they kind of remember, Herbie somewhat for Ohio State because it's just more recent. And the time he played was a lot closer. So I think Corso is a bigger deal to FSU fans because of that history. Not that many of them watched him play, but just knowing that, and then the times he's come back and done the chop and put on the headgear and different things like that. So I think that FSU storyline just means a little less nationally. And so I think when you pair that with the three factors, one, Florida State's terrible or was terrible the last, 16 months that we've seen them. Florida State being bad, Corso, his tie to FSU being 75 years ago, and then three, a top 5 playoff matchup, a playoff rematch. I think why they picked Texas at Ohio State was an absolute no-brainer. Am I frustrated by it? Sure. Do I wish it was in Tallahassee? Yes. Would I go to it? Absolutely. But I can kind of understand why they did it. Any thoughts on, we already talked about the top 5 matchup, but any thoughts on Corso's tie and then Florida State's struggles being the reason?
Yeah, definitely. If Florida State was ranked in the top 10 heading into the preseason, I think ESPN would have absolutely made that move. I think for me, it's more of a gesture to Lee Corso to do it in Tallahassee for his last game. But, there, like I said at the top of the show, there's no doubt the biggest game of the weekend that's going to draw probably over 10 million viewers is Texas and Ohio State. So I fully understand why Game Day is going there, but the ratings for College Game Day, in my opinion, typically are not based on which game they are covering in College Game Day. It's people are going to watch or they're not going to watch.
Yeah.
They watch if they go to, once a year they go to, 2 small schools, right? And like in North Dakota State or something, and their ratings are still pretty similar regardless of where they go. I just think from a business decision, you're going to promote a Fox Sports show. The game's going to be on Fox. It'll be in 4K, which is awesome, which I would love to watch that. But yeah, no, you made a fair point that, 2-10 does not help your case here. It's unfortunate that you went from 13-0 to 2-10. And because if this was coming off the snub where Alabama got in over Florida State, oh my goodness! Imagine the storylines you could have for that alone. Like they would have
two teams, yeah,
they would have.
To be fair, we did now by default. We did get Game Day right after the snub. Like again, by default,
by default.
But we did get it. It's not like they, So anyway,
but yeah, I think it's again, I understand ESPN's decision. If Game Day, if their goal is to go to the biggest game every week, then they made the right decision. I just think from a sentimental point of view, I really thought they were going to go to Tallahassee, and I may not even be up there for the Alabama game, TJ. But personally, I just think that's a something you do for Lee. After all he's done, he's never hid his affiliation to Florida State. I know he's more known as a national ESPN guy. However, the fact that he did play at Florida State, the Sunshine Scooter, Burt Reynolds' roommate, all those things that could have been really special. And it stinks that they chose Texas and Ohio State, but to your point, I fully understand why they did. It is by far, there's very few times you get a top 5 regular season matchup, and Game Day is going to take it when they can.
Yeah, so I get that. Here's a hot take. I think now outside of the Corso storyline, which I'm very biased toward, and you are too, and outside of the playoff, I think the best game, I think the game they actually should have been at, if you take the Corso thing away, if you take if this wasn't Corso's last, I don't think any of us would really have a leg to stand on to say to come to Tallahassee, just for what it's worth. Like if he went through the whole year, I think we would, so that's like the one wrinkle that gave us some hope. I think the best game, I think the game they should actually be at is Clemson versus LSU. The Battle of Death Valleys, a game that probably matters a lot more for the playoff. Let's be fair. Texas and Ohio State are both going to the playoff either way, right? It doesn't matter. Texas's SEC schedule is complete trash. Ohio State will run through the Big Ten. You've got the Manning storyline, obviously, the new quarterback storyline there, the defending national champions there. Obviously, the storylines are huge for Texas and Ohio State. And I'm not saying that won't be a good game. I am saying that game doesn't matter. Both those teams are going to the playoff. It doesn't matter who wins, who loses. I don't care if Arch Manning and Texas go in there and win by 30. If Ohio State runs through the Big Ten, which I'm not saying is necessarily going to be easy, but if Ohio State runs through the Big Ten, they'll be fine. It doesn't matter, right? I think they have like they normally do 4 or 5 warm-up games before they get into the meat of their schedule, and they'll be fine, right? We'll see if they can finally beat Michigan this year. Texas, same thing. They could lose this game by 20. They'll be fine with their SEC schedule. Manning will be fine. They'll go to the playoff. What matters, though, is can Brian Kelly and LSU avoid going 0-6 to start seasons? The Cade Klubnik versus Garrett Nussmeier, like that could be QB1, QB2 in this year's draft. To me, all things, that's the game that Herb Street's calling that night. That is the game they should actually be at. But, better game, more, it's 2 Southern teams, 2 teams that not a Fox game, not a noon game. That would be the game that, to me, would be the pick if you were going football alone. Storylines, I understand why they're up at Texas, Ohio State. I understand why Alabama, Florida State might have been considered for Corso and things like that. But LSU Clemson would have actually been my pick if it wasn't for the Corso thing.
Yeah, no, that should be a good one. Obviously, both Clemson and LSU are big brands, and ESPN they've kind of hitched their wagon to the Southern football, mainly the SEC, but really college football in the South. So that would have made sense. I love that quarterback matchup, but I understand why they did what they did. It's just frustrating because just to recap from your point earlier, if Florida State even went 9-3 last year, they'd be probably a top 20 team heading into the season. Alabama is going to be top 10, maybe top 5. That would have been an easier decision for them to say, hey, you know what, Fox is going up to Columbus. Let's go ahead and go down to Tallahassee. But unfortunately, we did not take care of business, and this is where we're at now.
Will we see Game Day in Tallahassee before 2028? So will we get it? I would be pretty surprised if we got it this year for anything. I guess if we're 4-0 and Miami's 4-0, that could be a possibility. Florida State will be ranked if they beat Bama, and then they'll win the next 3 games. So they'll be 4-0 going into that. And I guess Miami would have 2 wins against Notre Dame and Florida if they were undefeated. So I guess stranger things have happened, but Miami would be our only chance for it this year. I don't think we play a high-profile enough team later on in the year, and I don't think we'll have enough wins, just to be very fair. So let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say we're not undefeated and Miami's not undefeated. We don't get Game Day week 5, I guess it is, because we have a bye in there. Or actually, it's week 6 because we have a bye in there and play 4 games. But do we get Game Day before 2028?
So I'm looking at the future schedules. Clemson is always a possibility, depending on how both teams are doing. So next year, 2026, home games, you got Notre Dame. So that's a possibility. 2027, you have Georgia. So that's another possibility, depending on what this program's trajectory looks like going beyond that. So I think Clemson in Miami every other year are a possibility. And then having Notre Dame and Georgia coming to Tallahassee before 2028, it's possible. But again, it's going to be up to Florida State to make that happen, because I'm confident that Georgia will continue to be a top 5 program in the country, top 3 really. And Notre Dame's always going to be in that top 10 range. And they are the biggest brand in the world when it comes to college football.
Yeah, I agree. Is that Notre Dame game early? I'm sure it is, but
they haven't announced the game yet, or the date yet.
So yeah, it would be ideal if that game was early, for that to happen. I think, just because the later you get into the season, the better you have to be for it to happen. I don't ever think the Florida game will get game day. It just feels like, or not anytime soon. It feels like that's so far off, because both teams, you know how long it's been since both teams were really good. You know, even back 10 years ago in 2015 when we. Yeah, that's how you got to go back. You got to go back pre-Jameis almost. 2015, both teams had 9 wins, 10 wins, somewhere around there. But Florida was like fake good. We blew them out in the swamp. It wasn't, Florida State was okay that year. They lost to Houston in the Peach Bowl. So I don't know. I think we're a long way off from a Florida State game day. But Miami early in the year. Georgia early in the year, Notre Dame early in the year, maybe. I'd say it's not. I say we don't have it the next 2 years, but we'll see. Maybe I can be wrong.
I remember that 2012 game, because Florida State and Florida were both 10-1 heading into that game.
Yeah.
And it was a huge deal. Florida and Florida State, I think they played 12 times in the 90s, and both are ranked in the top 10 every single matchup in the entire decade, which is just insanity. I do think Florida has a chance to be really good, but their schedule is not easy, obviously. If Florida State can find a way to beat Alabama in week 1, maybe you get some of that false bravado and some confidence, and you maybe win a game or two that you probably should have lost. You never know. I'm not saying Florida State's going to beat Alabama by any means. But it's a possibility that, like you said, week 4 against Miami, or week 5 against Miami would be potential, because I think Miami should be pretty good this year again. I think they're amazing in the trenches, and we'll see what else they have. But yeah, there's some possibilities there.
Yeah. I think if you beat Alabama, I think you'll be a top 20 team. I think they'll probably slot you around somewhere around like 17 or 18. And then you're going to win your next 3 games, I would think, against Kent State, East Texas A&M, and probably on the road at Virginia. And so just by default, you move up to a couple of spots every week. You're going to be pretty close to top 10 at that point. And, again, if Miami beats Notre Dame and Florida, both games down in Miami, both teams going to be top 15 teams by the time you play them. They'll be top 10 at that. They'll be certainly top 10. If they're 4-0 with 2 top 15 wins, they might be closer to top 5. So that would be the possibility. If not trying to get you guys to cheer for Miami, but if you want to have game day come, that would be the scenario that would potentially do it. So, all right, ESPN snubs us. They hate us. I take back everything I said, justifying it. They suck. So, hey, if you're watching this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. We'll have another video or 2 this week. We appreciate you guys for hanging out on Double Fries No Slaw. Go Noles.